Welcome to GCSE English Unlocked with me, Mrs. Dixon, your guide to mastering AQA English language and literature. Each episode is designed to help you revise with confidence, consolidate key skills and unlock the secrets behind top grade answers. Whether you're tackling Shakespeare, analysing unseen poetry or perfecting your persuasive writing, this podcast will break everything down clearly so you can walk into your exams feeling calm, prepared and in control. So grab your notes, settle in and let's start unlocking your English potential. Hello and welcome to another 10-minute revision blaster. Today we're looking at one of the most emotional breakup poems in the AQA Love and Relationships anthology. This one is When We Two Parted by Lord Byron. Yes, again, it's not the cheeriest of poems, but let's have a look. We'll unpack the title, first line, key imagery, structure, context, and the final line, and finish off with what it compares best to across the anthology. So again, this is all going to be done in 10 minutes. So not a huge amount of time. Grab a pen. If you've got a copy of the poem, that would be brilliant. So let's get into it. Here's the poem in full, When We Two Parted by Lord Byron. When we two parted in silence and tears, half broken-hearted to sever for years, pale grew thy cheek and cold, colder thy kiss, truly that hour foretold sorrow to this. The dew of the morning sunk chill on my brow, it felt like the warning of what I feel now. Thy vows are all broken, and light is thy fame. I hear thy name spoken, and share in its shame. They name thee before me, and knell to mine ear. A shudder comes over me. Why wert thou so dear? They know not I knew thee, who knew thee too well. Long, long shall I rue thee, too deeply to tell. In secret we met, in silence I grieve, that thy heart could forget, thy spirit deceive. If I should meet thee after long years, how should I greet thee? With silence and tears. So it goes without saying really that this isn't one of the more positive romantic poems. It follows on quite naturally from Neutral Tones by Thomas Hardy. We tend to divide the Love and Relationships anthology into three clusters. So there's the romance ones, which is the kind of cheery romance ones, Winter Swans, Sing Song, Sonnet 29, into the romance cluster. Then we've got the family cluster, which is Walking Away, Mother Any Distance, etc. And then we have the kind of, sometimes I call it the unrequited love or the difficult love cluster, and this certainly comes comes into that cluster. And this guy isn't much cheerier than poor old Thomas Hardy. So starting with the title, remember this is your freebie, When We Two Parted. Whether you're writing about this one as your main poem that they print, or it's the comparison one that you choose, the title, there's always stuff you can say if you're not sure where to start. So the title immediately sets the tone of regret and loss. We know this isn't going to be a positive poem. When tells us that this parting, it's already happened, and there's a sense of reflection and inevitability. Again, very similar to Neutral Tones, that the speaker hasn't moved on. This is a memory that haunts him. And like Thomas Hardy's poem, this does have quite a haunting feel to it. When we two parted, it makes it intimate but also painfully divided. So two people who were once together are now separated. So that word parted is quite emotionally charged, I think. There's a sense of broken heart, of hearts being broken. It's not when you left me or when we broke up. Parted, there's a sense of real separation, being torn apart, I guess. It suggests mutual pain as well, but also perhaps that the speaker feels powerless. So quite a bit to say about the title there. First line again, lots we could say here. So the poem opens with an emotional understatement, silence and tears, and it ends with exactly the same phrase. So like Thomas Hardy, I know I've talked about him a lot already, this is a cyclical structure. The speaker hasn't healed. Okay, so these aren't two poems where the speakers are kind of reflecting on a breakup and thinking, well, I learnt from this and, now I've moved on. They're haunted, they're hurt, they're stuck in this cycle of regret and loss. So time hasn't healed here. Time hasn't changed the pain. Silence and tears. There's a sense of secrecy here and repression, and this runs throughout the poem, this sense of secrecy. This relationship, in the poem was likely hidden. And sometimes those relationships can be really hard to grieve and to get over because there's no channel or way to vent or express the grief. And tears as well. Tears show that the emotions are still raw. So I don't think this was like a screaming argument that this couple have had, where they sort of yelled at each other, never speak to me again. This was a kind of agonisingly painful parting, but there was silence. Again, perhaps there wasn't much left to say. Perhaps this wasn't a relationship that could be shared publicly, that couldn't be out in the open. So this is a poem that is ensconced in shame, silence, secrecy, mystery. So let's pick out some of the key imagery. Byron's imagery is cold, physical and haunting, and almost death-like, I would say. And again, I know I keep banging on about Hardy, but it does go well with some of the cold, sort of dead imagery from Hardy's poem. Remember we talked about grey leaves, this idea of rotting, decay, the neutral tones. There is death-like imagery here as well. So in Byron's poem, When We Two Parted, we've got words pale, cold, chill, dew. So I always say to my students that finding patterns in the language is a really good way to increase your marks. Looking for semantic fields, looking for patterns, tracing your route through the poem. So pale, cold, chill, dew of the morning, it creates a sense of death, mourning. Again, the relationship has died. And this is reinforced so clearly by this word knell. So a knell is a funeral bell. It's spelled Knell. And again, that reinforces the feeling and also gives it like a sense of finality. There's no coming back from this. They're not going to be able to restore this. The bell has been rung. This relationship is now in the stages of being mourned. It is not going to be revived. And then again, the kisses and the vows that should be warm are described as cold and broken. And I'm really sorry, I'm going to mention him one more time. This compares really nicely to the deadest smile in the Thomas Hardy poem. Here, it's the kisses. Kisses should be warm, intimate, but instead they're cold. And the vows are broken. Byron also uses religious and moral imagery. We've got the lines, "Thy spirit deceive and thy vows are all broken." This again suggests guilt or shame, especially in the context of an affair. But also, I guess, some moral pressure on the partner. Thy vows are broken, thy spirit deceive. And I actually can make a connection here to Love's Philosophy by Shelley. So if you remember, in Love's Philosophy by Shelley, he says, nothing in the world is single, all things by a law divine. So what both poets are doing here is putting on a bit of pressure, I guess, by giving moral weight to their partner, giving a bit of guilt, maybe suggesting that they've somehow gone against God's will. So this would actually compare, again, another one it would compare nicely to is Love's Philosophy, because Love's Philosophy, it's warm, it's intimate, there's lots of sexual undertones, it's very physical, whereas this poem is dead, in the sense that there's no life left here. Structure and form. This poem is written in regular quatrains, 4-line stanzas with a strong rhythm and alternating rhyme. The structure mirrors the control the speaker tries to maintain, the control he strives for but hasn't quite got, but inside the emotions are turbulent. The repeated silence and tears at the start gives it a trapped feeling, just like Hardy, suggesting the speaker can't move on. So this memory is framed in silence and tears. This is the bit that he can't escape, is this strong emotions. Again, this is a guy who cannot move on from this relationship. The poem uses enjambment and caesura. There's a mixture of flow and pause here, which could reflect that emotional turbulence. Perhaps when we have these emotionally charged conversations, words spill out but then we pause, words spill out but then we pause. Okay, I am very conscious of the time. Context. So Lord Byron, he was one of the most famous romantic poets. Remember, the romantic movement was a literary movement that valued a love of nature above all else, hence the natural imagery in this poem. But Byron, he was notorious for his scandalous love life. And this poem is thought to be about Lady Frances Wedderburn Wester. So Byron was thought to have had a secret affair with while she was married. And then this is about the aftermath of the affair and the gossip. And Byron is definitely like humiliated and betrayed in this. There's a sense that he feels wronged and shamed and guilty, but he hasn't really got anywhere to vent there. So there's this kind of duality going on in this poem. So while it seems like this very private moment, this private heartbreak, this is also about being connected to somebody famous and your name being in the public eye. And we see this in the line of public shame when he says, the light in her fame. So it reflects romantic themes, not just of nature with the dew of the morning or whatever, but we've got emotion, secrecy, rebellion, personal suffering, which were all things that the Romantic poets as well tackled in their writing. So again, this is what we could call a sort of timeless poem, in that this happens to people today. People who are associated with famous people can have their names dragged through the mud and appear in gossip columns and things when things go wrong. Last line, always really important. So the repetition of the last line, it drives home emotional paralysis. I'd write that down in your notes. It'd be a really fancy thing to say. After all this time that's passed, he still can't speak. He can't articulate his feelings. He can just cry. He feels tragic. He feels a bit bitter. His heartbreak has no resolution. Comparing to other poems in the anthology, Neutral Tones, I don't need to say it again, I've mentioned him enough. And Love's Philosophy contrasts completely. That one celebrates romantic connection and unity, while Byron's poem mourns its loss. So I'm going to go for Neutral Tones and Love's Philosophy. So to wrap it up, Byron's When We Two Parted, it's a powerful exploration of secrecy, heartbreak and lasting emotional wounds. Cold, deathly imagery, there's a tight structure, his personal context, he captures the pain of a relationship that never really ends for him. For that one person. Okay, that's all for today. That's our 10-minute revision blaster done. If you found this helpful, check out our previous episodes on Neutral Tones and how Hardy's emotional bleakness compares to Byron's intensity. So until next time, happy revising and keep unlocking those secrets of GCSE English.